Hey gang, welcome back for another episode. This time around I finally get around to painting up the other 27 of my 30 poxwalkers. If you remember from a previous episode, we sort of took 3 of them, devised a plan of attack for the whole crew, tested out some different colors and some, I don't know, entry-level techniques. And so this episode we're going to actually see them all get painted. There's a lot of interesting different stuff going on with these models. There's a lot of flesh, there's bone, there's metal, in this case rusty metal, there's clothing, so cloth and leather. The poxwalkers as a big unit production line thing teach a lot of stuff, and I definitely learned a lot about. Basically, I've only done a few models before in the past, so lining up 27 and pacing myself, trying to stay consistent. I didn't do great at it, but I learned a lot about it, and I have some thoughts for the future of when I have some other big groups to paint. I think I'm probably from here on out going to be a one model at a time kind of person, but maybe for exercise I'll do big batches again in the future. On a related note, I cleared out a shelf, which will be where I'm going to put all of this Death Guard army. Right now it looks pretty empty, so I'm going to think about, not in this episode, but very soon, and I've got some footage on this to cut. I'm going to do some terrain stuff and try to deck this shelf out so that I can kind of show progress here as my army builds up. Hopefully it looks like a really cool spot for them to hang out and make sense of. So more on that in the future, but let's get underway. This is 0 to 40k. If you remember correct from a previous episode, I tested out a plan with 3 out of the 30 poxwalkers. We're going to execute that plan now. I've got all my color choices, sort of my steps, though the step-by-step part is a little bit something I need to work on. We'll just call it that. I do run into some issues where I have to go back a lot, but I'm getting the sense that that's kind of okay. As you can see here, I have a heaping pile of 27 poxwalkers that have been primed in Death Guard green. This is kind of the moment when I realize, this is going to be a long road. I'm going to have to learn a bit of patience, but the whole point of this project is to learn and grow and get better. And while I think, as I noted before, I'm probably going to be a one model at a time person in the future, this as an exercise was really good because you can never really see the light at the end of the tunnel. You're just constantly looking at this row of models getting their next step. And I think there's something cool about that. If I do large batches again in the future, it's not going to be for speed runs. It's going to be for the exercise, the sort of calisthenics of going through that, because the amount of time with brush in hand really taught me a ton and got me a lot more comfortable. I ended up spending a lot of time while painting on the first coat of flesh, really investigating these models and looking at how different they are. Most of them have the same components. There's a decent amount of exposed flesh with some amount of guts or tentacles, or some exploded boils, some amount of metal work, some fabric, some leather, spiky bits, but it's easy to sort of get lost in the shuffle. So a lot of what I'm doing here at the same time as I'm painting is just sort of getting to know each model and how they display all those components I just described. I'm trying to be a little bit more contemplative as I go, and it was a lot of fun because there's a pile of these, and I got to give credit to the people that made these models, the designers. It's they treat the same sort of components in very interesting new ways on each one. As you can see with this guy, he's got this crazy big hand, and he's got this elbow that's kind of got bone coming out of it. It's really just kind of cool to intimately take a look at these models. Uh, After I got all the skin done, basically just went around, red, yellow, blue on all the clothing, hit all the brown parts in terms of leather boots, bags, belts, and things like that. I really enjoyed this step with all these interesting horn-like, bony, spiky bits coming out of the models. It just felt really good to paint them. You can tell as a complete novice that they're going to be a little bit transitional in how they look. Like maybe they're a little darker as they're coming out of the skin, and then they get lighter. It also kind of makes, I don't want to say that it makes it pop because these guys are pretty drab, but that sort of conflict of a close to white color when you're working with a bunch of other drab stuff, it starts to make the model just kind of come together and look a lot cooler. And then with this set of Poxwalkers, the treatment of those sections is very unique, model to model. So it's kind of a fun little treat to zip around from each one and see how that's interpreted. If you look at this guy right here, he's got some huge horn with nails going through it. I mean, that is like the coolest thing. One of them has like a fan of spikes going across its shoulders. Each one super unique here, and these parts are relatively easy to paint because they all stick out. So this part's a real treat for me. I'm applying some skeleton horde. If I look at my notes, yes, skeleton horde to the base of these bony, spiky structures at this point. Taking a peek, you can see even in the last segment, some of these models, their skin has already gotten a wash of Seraphim sepia. And at this point, you can see with the big blurry glob in the background, I've got to do a little bit of back and forth with my different stages of work just so I can let things dry in a way that's efficient while still taking advantage of the time that I have to sit at the desk and do painting. This is something that I didn't anticipate happening, but something that I got to work on in the future is with a batch, sometimes it makes sense to do, 5 models with this step, set them aside so they can dry, then do 5 other models with this other step. And with the washes, it kind of makes sense to just kind of cycle through. You just have to be really careful about where you put the models down. I basically was bullpenning them off screen to the left as they were getting through this phase. So I had several little pods of models lying about. Tentacles and guts, tentacles and guts. All my boys got tentacles and guts. This stage is a heck of a lot of fun. Adding a little bit of red in brightens things up a bunch. It definitely feels like you're turning a corner, but with these Poxwalkers, it's also a little bit of a challenge. Um, where skin gives way to proper tentacle can be a little tough to negotiate. And if you look at this guy right here, like one of his feet just like sort of goes full club foot off the side in a weird way. There are interesting spots here, but it's nice. You're like finally adding some legit color here that's not going to get dimmed down too much. So this phase was a lot of fun. And I think this one pretty much is the last bit of color before I start getting into the metallics. This is actually one of my favorite models here because it's got a bit of everything. You can see I'm actually going back, from a distance. I thought this thing I'm painting right now is a tentacle, and I'm like, that's actually bone. So it's a really good mix. He's got this mechanical arm that I'm going to rust up like crazy in a bit. I think this guy might. It's between this guy and Longcoat Dude with the Mega Hammer. These two might be my favorite models out of the bunch. If you remember from a few episodes back, I had a slight mishap with this Tesseract glow, but I did want something as a highlight for these like boils and grotesque poppy bits of skin. So I'm going back to the well, and this stuff definitely will pop. But I'm not going to make the same mistake I did last time by trying to pour it out of the pot. You can see here I'm palming a secret weapon. So when you buy new brushes, they come with this little plastic sleeve that goes over the bristles so that they ship without totally getting damaged. And I did get some new brushes, nothing great, but they were new and they had these things in there. And so I'm basically going to use that as a pipette to pull some of this Tesseract glow out of the pot without turning the thing on its side and making a complete mess all over the palette. And this actually worked out fine. They're, amazingly disposable extra bits anyway. But as you see here, I just I don't want to shake it and get all the stuff. I just want the sort of radiological yellow. So I just grab a little bit at a time. So apparently I learned something in terms of being safe, which I'm quite proud of. Lots to keep in mind here when doing this pass of metal. My eye naturally just wants to go towards the weapon, but there's a lot on the model. There's little loops and buckles. I think one of them has a gas masky thing. A few of them have metallics on their faces. So there's a lot to pay attention to. I end up going back a lot of times because I find another piece of something somewhere that should be shinied up. These guys will get grimed up in a few minutes, but it was just interesting to sort of see how often I would have to come back and hit another piece of the model. The other part is, I'm trying to be careful when you're playing with something like Lead Belcher. It's going to scream if you sort of have a mishit somewhere on top of a color, especially if it's something you already washed. I got to figure out what step to do this in. I probably should have done the metal before I washed anything, but I'm extra careful if my brush goes astray and try to do a wipe off. I do have to go back and clean a few times where I have some misses. But with drab colors like this, any spot that you hit with Lead Belcher that's a miss is just going to scream, especially if it's up against the edge of a bag or something like that. So it was just interesting to stay mindful of that. I don't think I'm ever going to get tired of applying corrosion effects to metals. I still don't know how much is too much. I think I'm going to find that out soon in a future episode when I work on some terrain features that have a lot of metal on them, because I'm going to corrode the living daylights out of them. And not look back. I kind of want to find out how much is too much before I start working on my Plague Marines. This step is just fun. It's just straight up good times taking something shiny and not just dropping it down a notch with a wash, but actually just making it look totally grossed out, overused. It's really interesting how transformative it is. I'm happy to say I have practically no technique with it whatsoever. I know I'm probably using the wrong brush on it, but it's just like it's bliss. It's very visceral. And so I'm having a lot of fun here. Here we are, folks. We're on the home stretch. At this point, I'm just taking some Riser Rust and dry brushing the daylights out of a bunch of the metallic parts. I really find this part enjoyable. It looks like an absolutely horrifying, not so sharp edge. I just imagine these poxwalkers going into battle with just this old junkyard stuff. So this is a lot of fun. After this step, I kind of just do cleanup here and there, just and not too rigorously. I just find spots where I'm like, oh, I missed this or that, and I just sort of hop around with different paints and sort of fix things up, and eventually we get a finished product. Yes, there's definitely base work that still needs to get done. So this mission isn't entirely completed, but for now, this is where we're going to pause. I'm very excited to have gotten through all of these poxwalkers. I feel like I have the start of an actual army now. They're all sitting on this shelf, which looks a lot more full, but still amazingly empty. I'm looking forward to doing some terrain sometime soon, so that this shelf can start to look like an environment that is welcoming to this kind of folk. And I'm also, really excited to start just painting model after model after model and filling this shelf up so it looks like a really awesome big army. So thanks again for joining me for this, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.